This week at PAX East, Larian Studios unveiled the Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay demo, and fans were waiting with bated breath. Technical difficulties aside for poor Sven Vinker, who is the president of Larian Studios, the gameplay demo showcased what fans had been waiting for to see if it was a true successor to Baldur's Gate 2 and stayed in the same vein as the Baldur's Gate franchise or be something else. And many people were polarized by what they saw and felt that it played a lot too much like the Divinity series, which is highly acclaimed, however, is a different beast for many to the Baldur's Gate series. So the question has been thrown around, why not make Divinity 3 instead of Baldur's Gate? So in this video, I aim to objectively break down the differences between Baldur's Gate and, say, Divinity, and talk about what we saw in the gameplay demo. Starting with the easiest thing to break down and compare is the storyline. This is going to be set on the Sword Coast and is going to share similar locations that we've seen before in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Baldur's Gate 3 is going to depart from the Baalspawn series as it had reached its natural conclusion by the end of the events of Baldur's Gate 2. So this game is going to be set in the future in the same area, except we're going to be following the storyline of the Illithids, which are mind flayers. We've seen in the previous series, however, they are astral travelers, and we have seen in the latest intro cinematic that an Ulitharid, which is basically one of their nobles or demigods, has astral traveled into Baldur's Gate region, about 200 kilometers away from Baldur's Gate, and infect people with their tadpoles or ceramorphosis, which basically turns humanoids into mind flayers to bolster their ranks. One such victim of ceramorphosis seems to be the player character, and that's how the game kicks off. We also have the Gith hunting down the mind flayers, which are their natural enemies, and it seems we may be able to choose whether to side with the evil Illithids or the Gith, who also seem to fall in the alignment of evil. And so we also get powers kind of like the Slayer form in Baldur's Gate from becoming an Illithid. So there's a boon to becoming a mind flayer. However, it comes obviously with a dark price. Now, the story seems to be totally in line with the Baldur's Gate series. There's nothing out of order in the cinematics. They're gorgeous. They could be in one of the old Black Isle / BioWare games if they were put out in 2020, and you really wouldn't know the difference. However, as soon as we move into the character creation aspect of the gameplay, that's where things start to change. Now, there are many more races available and also backstories which affect your character in later dialogue, which is cool elements to go through. However, one thing I didn't see was an alignment, because if you're choosing to become a holy paladin, how would you side with the Illithids or the Gith? It doesn't make sense as both are evil. So I'm not sure if alignment really plays into it. And for a role player in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, this is a big aspect for people. So outside of some natural progression of some of the classes and the character creation, when we move into the universe itself, we see a huge departure from the Baldur's Gate aesthetic. The environments are now in a 3D world, which makes sense in 2020 to at least have some more 3D rendering than the painted backgrounds, though there is nothing wrong with that. There's certainly some nostalgia to it, and Pillars of Eternity do a wonderful job of keeping something that actually does look a lot more Baldur's Gate-like. So you have the isometric view, which players are recognizing straight from the Baldur's Gate series, so that keeps you feeling kind of in the same aspect ratio. However, the game seems to be better played with a behind the head over the top third person view. So that really does change and break the camera aspect that really takes two things away from the aesthetic that players come to know and love, and does mirror the Divinity art style and camera angles a lot more than Baldur's Gate. Whether you enjoy it or not, the shift in camera, or think that the isometric view and the 3D world work, is something to personal preference. However, again, I would say that Pillars of Eternity does still seem to have some 3D aspect to it, and it does look a lot more like the Baldur's Gate universe that fans are used to. Outside of the aesthetic, the dialogue options also seem to be very different. The first thing is that your backstory plays heavily into the characters. However, instead of a portrait view but the 3D world and the way the characters interact, the dialogue physically just looks different, though the character itself does not respond to the dialogue and doesn't have spoken voice lines, only who is speaking to you, so it seems to be fully voiced on one side, which is very similar to the Baldur's Gate series. The biggest gripe from fans, obviously as a gameplay demo, seems to come from the fact that the combat has strayed heavily from the original Baldur's Gate, which utilized a pause system, which would allow you to accrue all your abilities, set up your whole party to attack, and then when you unpaused, there would be the dice roll where your weapons or magics were using a dice system, which a lot of fans were familiar with from Dungeons and Dragons, and then obviously people had saves and resistances that they would have to adhere to. You could either look at said dice system or just know that it was happening in the background, and you could be cognizant of it, but you didn't have to learn the full Dungeons and Dragons system. Now, this is one of the core pillars of Baldur's Gate 3 and one of the contentions I've seen online from fans. Instead, Larian has chosen to go with what they know, which is more of their Divinity style combat, and it utilizes an AP system where you have action points and can have multiple turns, but basically a turn-based combat. Remembering that the Divinity series is highly acclaimed and loved, it isn't necessarily a quote-unquote bad thing, but it is a departure from what fans know, so clearly it's polarizing. Now, you do still have a die roll that happens. You can see it in the corner when combat is occurring. However, it really represents itself more, as I can see, as a percentile, a chance to hit, versus the old die system, which just shows you the saves versus the die rolls. This is a stark reminder of Fallout 1 and 2, utilizing an AP system, then shifting to a third-person world and real-time combat with some of the old VAT system, which was updated and changed for Fallout 3 and beyond. It did, in fact, splinter or fracture the franchise somewhat, though many on the whole felt that this was for the best to open an open world sandbox that was 3D for Fallout, so it wasn't a net negative. However, it did, as I said, polarize the fans, which then created more of an offshoot with the Wastelanders series, which is less popular overall. However, it really does cater to the core fans. So the question really remains, if aesthetically this game is accepted by the fan base and isn't too much of a departure. People are happy with the 3D world, the different style and tone of the graphics, and also the ability to choose between the isometric view and the third person behind the head view. And they also accept that the storyline is a natural conclusion. Let's say that it is excellent and well written. It seems to be set really well in the Baldur's Gate universe. The real question is if the combat is going to be an upgrade. Now, there are other franchises that you can look to that have tried something new and it's worked out well. This might be a far-fetch, but Mario is known as Jumpman. The whole mechanics behind Mario is how he moves, how he jumps, and the satisfaction of doing that. However, in the 90s, there was the Mario RPG game, which had the same aesthetics as Mario, however, was of course an RPG, and fans, some of them loved it, some of them hated it, but the difference, I believe, between Mario and, say, Baldur's Gate is you get a new Mario game every X amount of years, every console, and it's usually a banger. It really works out. Baldur's Gate has been 20 years of built-up nostalgia, which was heavily earned. The disappointment is hard to articulate to tell people of a time where you played a game and was so immersed by the storylines and the gameplay, the characters as well, the companions, the enemies, Saravok or John Irenicus. I actually sat and listened to, I believe his name is David Warner, the voice lines of John Irenicus the other day, just to watch his storyline masterfully crafted, and I realized it was more of an experience or something that as you are younger, you can't really articulate or understand the full impact of a game like that on your life. And so it really is a hard task for Larian Studios to come in and meet those expectations, especially as we haven't played the game yet, and maybe on par, or I dare say it in some ways in combat, actually surpass Baldur's Gate. However, if you really love the old school style system, you might want to shift over to a series of Pillars of Eternity. It may miss the mark, and people may actually wish that Obsidian had taken over, which I've seen online, but it remains to be seen how much of a departure, and obviously if this will unite the fans or further fracture them, though I'm going to assume some people are just naturally going to be turned off by the fact that it's different, which is okay. I hope, obviously, that the majority of people get what they want, that Larian made some bold, creative decisions which pan out for the fan base, because at the end of the day, all I want is for fans, in the majority, you can't please everybody, to be happy and to share the experience and to get more Baldur's Gate games. And if this one does fall short, hopefully they learn from their mistakes and do fix them for the next iteration. But that is just my thoughts. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Baldur's Gate 3, if it is Divinity 3, or it is deserving of just waiting and trying it first. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Traveler.